Good morning, everyone. I don't know which side I'm going to be looking at. I'll have to go back and forth. Just got Keith here in the middle. Great to see all of you here. Glad you could be here for worship this morning. Let's just take a moment here. Let's begin with a song to get our minds ready, get us primed, and remembering the reason that we're here. And let's worship together. This is the day that the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it, This is the day that the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. This is the day that the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it, This is the day that the Lord has made, I will rejoice and be glad in it. This is the day that the Lord has made. All right. As we get started this morning, again, just want to say welcome. Glad you're here, especially if you're visiting. Happy that you're here and can join us for worship this morning. Also want to welcome those of you who are joining us online from YouTube later in the morning when this is posted. Glad you could be with us wherever you are this morning. Wish you could be here. Hope to see you soon. So we get started this morning with our period of worship. I just wanted us to have a brief moment of prayer, direct our minds, and then we'll stand and sing together and praise our God. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you this morning. We come before your throne humbly and in awe of your presence. Father, we're grateful to have this time together as a family to be able to worship you. As we lift our voices to you this morning, we pray that we can put all things out of our minds. And Father, that we can worship you with our whole hearts and leave nothing on the table. Give it all to you, Father. Just be with us this morning and throughout the rest of this day, Father. May our lives be focused on you, our hearts turn to you at all times, not only during this hour. And may our whole lives be used to glorify you. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's stand and sing together. The splendor of a king, clothed in majesty, let all the earth rejoice, He wraps himself in light, and darkness tries to hide. It trembles at his voice, How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God, how great is our God. Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God. I know that my Redeemer lives and ever prays for me. I know eternal life he gives, from sin and sorrow free. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know that over yonder stands a place prepared for me. A home, a house not made with hands, most wonderful to see. I know that my Redeemer lives. I know eternal life he gives. I know that my Redeemer lives. Standing on the promises of Christ my King, through eternal ages let his praises ring. Glory in the highest I will shout and sing, standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God my Savior. Standing. I'm standing on the promises of God, standing on the promises that cannot fail. When the howling storms of doubt and fear assail, by the living word of God I shall prevail. Standing on the promises of God, standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing. I'm standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises I cannot fall. Listening every moment to the Spirit's call. Resting in my Savior as my all in all. Standing on the promises of God. Standing on the promises of God, my Savior. Standing. I'm standing on the promises of God. Be seated, please. Let's skip ahead, Robbie. Couldn't help but almost laugh in there for a second, talking about standing, and all I see is Aaron dangling by his feet in front of me. That was quite the juxtaposition. The things you get to see up here as a song leader is just astounding. Sometimes it's awesome. Always a blessing. This morning, before Jeff comes and brings us our lesson, we're going to sing a song that's new to us here at CV as a congregation, but hopefully it's not new to all of you. This song is called Living Hope. This was released 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that, in the mainstream radio. And hopefully most of you know. Can I get a show of hands if anybody knows this song? Robbie, Joe. Maybe it'll sound familiar once we get started if you've heard it before. Very simple song, easy to pick up. So let's give this a try together. If you know it, sing out for me. How great the chasm that lay between us, how high the mountain I could not climb. In desperation, I turned to heaven and spoke your name into the night. Then through the darkness, your loving kindness tore through the shadows of my soul. The work is finished, the end is written. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Who could imagine so great a mercy? What heart could fathom such boundless grace? The God of ages stepped down from glory to wear my sin and bear my shame. The cross has spoken, I am forgiven. The King of Kings calls me his own. Beautiful Savior, I'm yours forever. Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Then came the morning that sealed the promise. Your buried body began to breathe. Out of the silence, the roaring lion declared the grave has no claim on me. Jesus, yours is the victory. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. Hallelujah, praise the one who set me free. Hallelujah, death has lost its grip on me. You have broken every chain. There's salvation in your name, Jesus Christ, my living hope. God, you are my living hope.
That's a great song. Thank you, Ryan. We're going to get better at that because we're going to sing it more, right? Some of you other worship leaders, get on the ball and keep us singing that so we know it well. Very powerful words, good tune. Good morning. Welcome. I am very glad that you are not joining me today from here, although some of you probably are, and that's okay too. There's a lot of stuff still going on, not the least of which is we got one of those big storms coming through. I hope nobody's home because of this, because it's probably not going to hit till tonight, but just want to make sure everybody's ready around here. If you're not from around here, this is what we do, right? When a storm is coming, I think the thing missing there is eggs. I always thought, we always need to make French toast if we're going to have a bad storm. The toilet paper is sort of self-explanatory. We all probably still have a good stock left over from COVID, but hope you're ready. We do have a new member to announce, and she is inclined toward late service-ness. So here's a picture of her. Her name is Linda Hines, and she's been visiting with us. I'm sorry? Did somebody say? I thought somebody corrected me, and then maybe I got the name wrong. I think it's Hines, Hines. And she has just moved into the area, I think from down in Maryland, moving into the Willow Street area. Longtime Church of Christ member, has met with the elders and is excited to be here. And so I hope you'll take an opportunity to meet her if you haven't already. And I don't know what the cross-pollination is of the different services, but look for Linda and introduce yourself. So I'm old. Okay, no amens. That's good. You never know. I'm really not old. That's a sliding scale, right? And however old you are, it's not really that old. It's always people older. But I'm older. I'm older than I used to be. I feel the march of time. Time is on my mind a lot more than it used to be. And, like all of us, I have no idea. This is a reality. I have no idea how many days I have left, how many years I have left. I hope it's decades. But I don't really know. None of us really know. But I do know one number. And it's a non-negotiable number. It's the number 168. It's how many hours there are in a week. And I checked the math on this because preachers notoriously are not good at math. So I went back, even though I was pretty sure, I ran it through the calculator, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Yep, it's true. 168 hours a week. That's what we get. And there's a lot of stuff we cram into those 168 hours, right? There's a lot of things that we do to fill up that weekly allotment. And there are things that we would say are important. Some of them are, maybe some of them aren't so much. Maybe the things that seem important to me aren't important to you. But we cram a lot of living into 168 hours every week. We do. We cram, work and sleep and eating and family and friends and God and church and exercise and hobbies and relaxation and charitable causes and probably other stuff I haven't mentioned there. You might be adding to that list. You might say, well, I don't have half of those things in there. I don't know. We're all different. The thing is, 168 kind of sounds like a lot. I mean, I guess all numbers are relative, but that sounds like a lot. That's a lot of hours. But the thing about that 168 is it's a hard cap. It's like the baseball salary cap, not the football salary cap. You can't go over it. You don't have, no, that's the other way around. Football, not baseball. You can't add to this. 7 days, 24 hours a day is all you get. There's no way to stretch it. There's no way to make it bigger. It just doesn't work that way, and it goes quick, doesn't it? If you're sitting down to try to calculate how you're going to fill up that 168 hours, it doesn't take very long before you do it. And it's just ironic how this changes over time. You think back to the frontier times in our country, basically if you go back and look at what life was like 200 or 300 years ago, people sort of did two things. They had their 168 hours a week, and they were either asleep or they were up working and fighting for survival. And so those were there are two options in the frontier stage. We're well past that. We got a lot more options today. There are a lot more things competing for our 168 hours. In fact, there's all kinds of surveys and stuff. I don't want to hit you with too many of these things, but sociology is kind of fascinating, and figuring out what makes us tick and how we live our lives it always gives us some things to think about. So I was reading an article this week out of Forbes about a fairly recent survey of American screen habits. I've talked about this here and there. I've confessed to you, this is a challenge for me. I think I spend too much time on screens. I would like to work on that. I'm having some success and some not success. But anyway, this survey goes back to 2018. So to me, it's even more fascinating because it's numbers from a survey done before the pandemic. But according to the survey that they were quoting, in America, the average American in 2018 spent every day 3.25 hours watching television and 3.5 hours on other kinds of screens. Not work time. Whatever screen stuff you're doing on your job is not counted in this survey. That's 3.25 hours on television, 3.5 hours every day on other kinds of screens during what we would call our leisure time. That's, that's a fairly significant amount of time. The good news for us is that as culture has changed, a lot of us are kind of doing both at the same time, right? We're watching TV and we're doing other stuff on our screens. I have a picture I should have found of my son one time doing 3 things at once. He was on the computer, he was on his phone, and he was playing a video game doing 3 things. He has 2 hands. I don't know how he did it, but we kind of multitask, but we still spend a lot of time, on those screens. That same survey actually said that if you are of Generation Z, which typically loosely we would define right now as if you're about age 10 through roughly age 22, a little fuzzy on the ends, you typically don't watch a lot of television compared to older people, but you spend, on average, about 9 hours a day, leisure time, in front of screens. That's a lot of time. And again, this is leisure time. It doesn't count what we're doing in our jobs. That's kind of shocking. And I don't know, the surveys are it's like any kind of stereotyping. Maybe it captures you, maybe it doesn't. Maybe you could say, oh, that's pretty much me. Or maybe you're going, but that's crazy, I'm nothing like that. But let me ask you, do you know how you spend your 168 hours a week? I mean, do you really know? Have you really ever thought about it? Have you ever really kind of sat down and considered it? How often do you take a hard look at where each of those 168 hours is going in your life? Or is it like I mentioned last week when I talked about spending, if you don't track it, you may really have no idea. You might actually be surprised to find out how much time you're spending doing this thing or that thing or the other thing because you've never really stopped and assessed. I told you a couple weeks ago we're going to spend the month of January talking about this idea of Advent. The Advent is by definition the arrival of any notable person, thing, event. Typically we do this in the Christmas season. We talk about the advent of the Messiah. That's a good thing. That's a beautiful thing. But what we're doing for the month of January is we're talking about the advent of a new year because, it's a good time, as good a time as any, to stop and to take stock and to reassess and to think about, where we've come from and where we're going. And so last week I challenged you, if you had a chance to watch from your sofa. I was in an office chair, but the good news is I was also in sweats and socks, so I kind of like that. But we talked about last week deciding in the new year to be people who spend less. And that's a challenging thing. It's a challenging thing for me to look at that. And so, we had a lot of views on YouTube last week. I think a lot of folks were home watching, and so I don't feel the need to recap this too extensively this morning. But remember that what we're really talking about there, as we talk about this idea of spending less, is this idea of developing more of an attitude in our lives of contentment. If we are content with what we have, if we are content with our lives, if we're not always looking for more or better, we have a real opportunity here to change the way we consume and the way that we spend. And so contentment is at the core of that. This week, I want to challenge each of us to think kind of about the flip side of this, which is that in the new year, we should challenge ourselves not just to spend less, but also to give more. And in this case, this is really a conversation about prioritizing. Or I guess realistically, for most of us, if we're going to take this on seriously, it's going to be a conversation about reprioritizing because we have already prioritized, right? If we look at our budget or if we look at the way we spend our 168 hours, well, we get a sense of our priorities. This is a case of, in both of these instances, looking at what we're doing and saying, well, is that what I should be doing? Do I need to change some things? Do I need to alter my focus? Do I need to reprioritize? Now, I am not naive. This is year 26 of me standing up in front of you and talking about stuff from the pulpit. And I know that when the preacher starts to talk about giving, you all instinctively reach for your wallets like, boy, I hope I didn't bring any extra cash this week. Or he's probably going to end up asking for something. I get that. I understand that. But the truth is, this is a necessary part of any conversation we have about the kingdom, about how the church works. Money is a necessary part of who we are, and it's a necessary part of how the church functions. And so God has always encouraged his kingdom people in all places at all times to give of their resources. This is something that is consistent from beginning to end. And so in the Old Testament, for instance, there are two really big principles that are described there. One we don't talk about too much. It's called first fruits. And this is the idea from the Hebrew scripture that God basically says, here's what you do. Whatever you have, if you're a farmer or if you herd sheep or whatever, whenever you bring in your harvest, whenever you get what you're going to have, you immediately take the first and the best of whatever you have, and you take it to the temple or the synagogue, and you give it to God, and then you determine, I'm going to live my life on what's left. God gets my first, he gets my best, I get what's left. That's the idea of first fruits. More common is the principle of tithing, which loosely is, we're encouraged, the Old Testament, the Old Covenant people were encouraged to give at least 10% of all the blessings that they have, of all the resources they have, to give it back to God. And so that gave them sort of a baseline of how much to give when you're giving your first fruits or anything else, to give a percentage. The New Testament is not so specific. There are pros and cons to that. But the basic principle is still there, which is that each of us should give generously of our resources. And really, as far as the kingdom goes, there's kind of three main reasons. Scripturally, we see that one of the reasons we need to give of our resources back to the church is that so hopefully that none of us go through life in need. Because the church is supposed to be one place where we can go if we don't have food or we don't have shelter or whatever. The church should be looking after our own. We should be looking after each other. And so those of us who have, give back to the church so that the church can share that with those who don't have. And so that's part of it. There's also the idea that the church needs resources in order to do kingdom work. And particularly the Great Commission, our mission to make disciples. And so that's going to take money at some point. It's going to take resources. And so we give toward that mission. And then also, not to be neglected, the idea that giving is in fact a spiritual discipline. It's an act of devotion. It's an act that if we had, the more we have of it in our lives, the more it shows that we're growing. The more it shows that we have a greater faith in God, because giving of whatever we have is an act of faith. Giving says, in effect, I can give my stuff away because I am confident that God is taking care of me. And that no matter how much I give, God is going to make sure that I have what I need. And so this is part of that as well, this spiritual discipline. And so, yeah, I should say, I don't think it's any earth-shattering thing for me to stand before you and say that our family budgets should be under review at the beginning of every year or the end of every year. However it is, when you look at what you have coming in, you get a salary increase or you lose your job, or you get a different job. You look at your budget and you say, okay, here's where the money's going to go. And as part of that, we should review our offering to the church. Our offering to God should be intentional. It should be generous. It should be sacrificial. I don't know about you. I need growth in all of those areas. I suspect, most, if not all of us do. And so this is an important conversation. And yet, I'm also mindful that, I don't know if you noticed, we've been going through kind of a turbulent time in the world last couple of years. Newsflash. And in particular, one of the things that's happened in the last couple of years is a lot of economic uncertainty. For a lot of different reasons. The job situation has gone up and down. Government funding has gone up and down. Inflation has mostly gone up, at least recently. There's a lot of things that have contributed to economic uncertainty. And while that has happened, I don't know if you've noticed, but this church's giving has stayed remarkably consistent. I didn't know what to expect. I don't know if you know, 2 years ago when this all started, almost 2 years ago, the government offered loans to help companies get through. Our church, we weren't sure what was going to happen, and so we applied for and got a large loan that essentially was going to be a government handout to help us get through. And in the end, when we got the paperwork from the bank, the elders said, you know what, we don't need it. They gave it back. They never signed the papers. Why? Because this church continued to give. And that's a beautiful thing. I'm really thankful for that. So much in the world was fluctuating, and yet our giving was consistent and it was solid. And so that is just, I don't know what the word is, deeply commendable. It says a lot about this body. It says a lot about each of us individually and our families. In the midst of a pandemic, when a lot of the world shut down, this church, I don't know if you remember, we added another full-time staff person. We added Isaac to our staff at a time when, a lot of churches were barely able to just keep the doors open. In a time of economic uncertainty, I don't know if you realize, we're almost out of debt for the addition that we built because of the way that you have given and the way that the elders have managed that money. And so we're almost debt-free. And so we're in a position now to ramp our ministries back up. And I cannot tell you how much I hope and pray that will happen, yesterday. It needs to happen. It's going to happen. It's going to happen this year. It's going to happen soon. So all that to say, there are going to be other times when I will stand before you and challenge each of us, challenge myself to give of our resources more, to give more financially. I will say you probably need to hear that from the pulpit more than you do. And so that is something that I own and something that's my responsibility. I should tell you as well, as we try to address that, one of the things we're hoping to do this year is that Chris Tonkinson is on the schedule to do another Financial Peace University at some point this year, which is a very good thing that a number of us have gone through that has helped with this spiritual discipline of giving. And so that's something that we can do to help you, and that will be happening at some point. That's all good. I think, though, that there's a bigger issue for the church right now when it comes to giving. It's a big issue for, let's call it the universal church, all Christians in all places. And especially, I would say it's a big issue for this church, and that is our willingness to give of our time, which is a different kind of offering, right? A different kind of giving. The Bible talks about time a lot. It kind of comes at it from different angles. I've been pondering this passage off and on, this passage in Psalm 90, where it's one of the very unusual Psalms of Moses, where Moses says to God, it's part of a prayer that he offers to God. He says to God, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. And I think it's critical when we read passages like that we appreciate the built-in limitations of each of our own mortality. right? This is basically a larger passage that is reminding us that we only have so many days. We don't know how many we're going to get. And so we need to be aware of that, not in a morbid sense, but in an appreciative sense. We are mortal people. We're not going to live forever. But in this conversation about priorities, I think it'll probably be, for most of us, it'll probably be more about the hours than it will be about the days. I think it's the hours where we get tripped up. You know, as we fill our lives with more and more things, that 168, I don't know, I think most of us probably feel it. That 168, it keeps getting squeezed. It doesn't feel like 168 anymore. Whatever 168 might have felt like, you know, when we were 6 and we didn't have any cares in the world and life was different, it's not like that anymore. That 168 keeps getting squeezed, and it's so easy for the church, the kingdom, to get crowded out in the process. I think that's happening. I think it's happening a lot. This is not a new thing. It's not just a pandemic thing. It's been a trend, I think, in all types of churches. Really, if you go back 3 or 4 generations just in our country, we see this happening. We see things happening in culture that affect the church. We see the rise of busyness and the rise of consumerism and materialism and just basic prosperity. And they've been sort of a cause and effect thing. One causes another, one is a side effect of another, but the net effect is we live in a world that has more options, more pressures, and our 168 keeps getting squeezed. And yeah, it's been accelerated, it's been intensified during a pandemic. During a pandemic that's seen a lot of churches go under. A lot of churches that are still existing are there, but they're hanging on. They're hanging on in survival mode. A lot of churches have been paring down like we did for a time and are trying to get out of this. We've pared down our ministry sort of to the essentials as we've tried to get through this time, and now we're struggling, to get things back up and running again. We're struggling to get back out there and to do mission. It's just, you take a break from something, even good things, for a while, it's hard to get it going again. I've been digging around in two books of the Bible right now that we're going to be talking about in sermons this year. I gave you a little preview of that 2 weeks ago. One is the New Testament book of Ephesians. The other is the Old Testament book of Ecclesiastes. And there's a lot of stuff in those. They're not books necessarily about time, but there is some content in there that's interesting on this subject of time and how we use it. And I think it's interesting just just because I've sort of been in that, there are other places we could look, but there is this idea that there is a time for everything, right? Everything sort of gets its piece. Contrary to what, if you're of a certain generation, that did not originate with the Byrds in 1965. And by the way, I was not even born in 1965, so I'm old, but I'm not that old. But they famously recorded a song that is actually based on, believe it or not, this passage of Scripture. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens, a time to be born and a time to die, and on it goes. Down through verse 8. I encourage you to go and read that. The thing is, God does not give us a strict plan for how to use those hours that he gives us each week. But he wants us to understand that with only 168 hours and with all the options that we face, and by the way, a lot more options than the writer of Ecclesiastes would have been thinking about as he sat down to write this, we're going to have to make some choices, right? If there's going to be a time for everything, we're going to have to choose. We're going to have to choose how much for everything so that everything can fit in that needs to fit in. I'm not amazed. We shouldn't be amazed that wisdom like that comes from a time that we just think of as being so simple and so, easy. You don't have to worry about that much. And yet even then, thousands of years ago, this is something that humans are dealing with. But, how we do that, God doesn't, sometimes we wish, well, God, just tell me how many hours a week I should do this and how many I should do that. God doesn't generally work that way. But, Paul challenges us more generally, and this is where we have to figure it out for ourselves. He challenges us more generally here in Ephesians chapter 5 that we need to make the most of our time. And that is actually a better rendering of this passage. The NIV says, make the most of your opportunities, I think, more literally and more practically here as well. Make the most of our time. And so Paul points out here that how each of us is going to use our 168 hours. That's one indication of whether in our lives godly wisdom is present or it's absent. How we use our time is one way that we could reasonably say, well, I'm demonstrating that I have the wisdom of God because I am using that wisdom to allocate my 168 hours, or I'm not. So, I hope at some point as you're thinking about this, you're asking yourself, well, does my 168 hours as I lay it out there, does it reveal godly wisdom at work? Or does it reveal maybe the absence of godly wisdom at work? The truth is, most of us have enough time. Most of us have enough time. We just have to decide to use it wisely. And that's really what it comes down to. And I want to suggest to you that it will be wise for most of us to commit to giving more time in 2022 to the life and the work of the kingdom of God. I really believe that. Because, time is precious. It is non-renewable. We can't get more of it. Once it's gone, it's gone. And so, we should really be spending it on things that are worthwhile, shouldn't we? As opposed to some of the alternatives, some of the places that it goes. So I don't know, what are some of the ways that you can use time to make a difference in the kingdom in 2022? Well, you could quit your job and move to a foreign mission field and spend all of your waking hours sharing Jesus with lost people. You could do that. Or you could quit your job and not move away, but stay here, but go spend your waking hours every day going door to door, knocking on the door, ringing the bell, trying to get people to come to the door and offering to them, hey, would you like to know about Jesus? I would like to have a Bible study with you. You could do that. Or you could quit your job and you could devote every waking hour to prayer. You could do that. And I want you to understand, I'm not belittling those things, and I am not being sarcastic. I feel the need to say that sometimes. Those would be good things to do. They would be. I have known people in my life, had people in my life who have made decisions like that. You know what? God is calling me to stop what I'm doing and to go somewhere else and to do this thing and to dedicate my life to it. I respect that. I admire that. The thing is, our tendency with discussions like this is sometimes we think too big. Sometimes we look at the size of the task and it overwhelms us. And so, we're listening to Jesus in Matthew 28 say, hey, go make disciples of every nation. And we're thinking, whoa, I don't know who my next door neighbor is, but you're telling me I should be worried about people who live in one of the stands over at, used to be the Soviet Union. How do I do that? Or, we're thinking, I need to go out and I need to make a difference in the kingdom. And we look out at how big the kingdom is and how much work there is, and we get overwhelmed by it. We do. For many of us, it's a giant leap. Think about where you are at on the discipleship path, right? Where you're at, and how much you've grown, hopefully, but how far you have to go to become like Jesus. For most of us, it's going to be a giant leap for me to say, for any of us to say, you know what, in 2022, I need to go from where I'm at to by the end of the year, I need to be an elder. That's going to be a big leap for a lot of us. It's going to be a big leap for a lot of us to say, well, I need to go from where I'm at as a disciple to by the end of the year, I need to design and implement and lead a brand new dynamic ministry that has never existed at this church before. That's a big leap. Instead, maybe we ponder some baby steps, right? Some things to get us going, some things to keep us moving down that path of discipleship, things to get us engaged, to get us exercised before we take some of these maybe bigger leaps. Maybe we just start by looking at that limited block of time that we have every week, this 168 hours, and we think about, where can I shift from spending time on things that don't matter to things that do matter? Maybe we just start there. How about that? Maybe you start with 30 minutes a week. Maybe you start with 60 minutes a week. Maybe you start with an evening a week. But we need to start somewhere in 2022. We need to take some baby steps. We need to get moving. We need to rethink our 168 hours. So there are some things you could do. If you came this morning thinking, I've come to hear something revolutionary that I've never heard before, well, guess what? It's great when that happens. But for the most part, what we have is what we have. This is not rocket science. You want to take a baby step this week? You need to seek out and find a discipleship group. We call them D groups here. These are mini small groups, 3 or 4 people, same gender, who get together weekly, spend time together, studying the Bible, praying, being accountable to each other. That is a great thing to do. Many of us have done that. Many of you have not. That would be a step you could take. Join a D group or maybe even lead one. I can tell you, talk to Danny. You will discover it's not that hard to lead a D group. What you have to have is a commitment to it. He'll give you some tools. He'll help train you. He'll help you find people to be in your D group. Maybe you could even lead one this year. That'd be a beautiful thing. Or maybe participate in a small group. Maybe you never have, or maybe you did before and you haven't in a while. Maybe it's time to, be in a small group. We have short-term groups. We have long-term groups. We have groups for women. We have groups for teens. We have groups for individuals. We have groups for families. Soon we're going to have a group for men. They sort of come and go. Some of them are ongoing. Some of them come in and come out. Some of them are online. Some of them are in person. We have a lot of groups. Participate in a group. Even better, maybe host a group. That's a little bit more. But, the groups need a place to get together. So maybe you could do that. Or maybe you could, I guess I shouldn't say this to early service people, but maybe people watching online. Maybe this year is the year you get your butts out of bed and you get to Bible class on time and you drag all the butts of all your little children with you so that all of your family's butts are in Bible class every Sunday. Not once in a while, but every week. Maybe that's the thing. Because some of us, we were in the habit of doing that a couple years ago, and we're not in the habit of that anymore. And so, well, you know what? Maybe that's the place to start. Or maybe you get to know your neighbor who you don't know, and you invite them to something at church. Maybe it's a chili cook-off or an Easter egg hunt, but it's something. Maybe you do that. Or maybe you invite, and maybe you walk up to somebody here that you don't know. Maybe you even stick around. Think about this, ponder this, pray about this. Maybe you even stick around till after Bible class and mingle with the late service people and pick out one you don't know. I had somebody ask me yesterday about somebody on Facebook. They didn't know who that was. I said, yeah, she's been here for 6 years and been a member for 3. They hadn't met. Maybe meet those people, somebody, pick one and ask them if they'd like to go to lunch after church, and you pay. And then maybe you try another person, a month later. Maybe 2 or 3 over the course of the year. Maybe try that. Or maybe get the names of 1 or 2 of our shut-ins. We got more than I wish we had. And commit to calling them regularly or visiting them regularly. We got people who are doing that. It's a beautiful thing. You don't have to, here's the thing, you don't have to visit every shut-in, but maybe if you pick 1 or 2 and you commit to 1 or 2, boy, that would make a difference in their lives. Or how about this? Maybe you spend a little time regularly writing encouragement notes to our elders, our shepherds. I don't know if you know this, but shepherding us, not an easy job. Shepherding us through a pandemic, really not an easy job. They could use some encouragement, right? As we all could. So maybe it's that. And that's just a couple ideas, really, the tip of the iceberg. Nothing there is, particularly earth-shattering, but if those things are not in your regular routine, it's a place to start, right? It's something to try. Look at how you're using your 168. Carve out some space by getting rid of some of the stuff that, let's face it, really doesn't matter. It's not bad to relax in front of the TV or online, but do you need 7 hours a day of that? Maybe you could carve out an hour a day and do something else with it. Maybe you could carve out some news time. Whatever news you're consuming, whether it comes from the left or the right, you are mostly being played for a fool and a sucker. Carve out an hour of that every day. Spend it on kingdom stuff. Use it for stuff that matters. Use it for stuff that advances the kingdom of God. We talked last week about how our spending often reflects, something deeper, our level of contentment, which means that for many of us, our need to spend is going to shrink as our level of contentment grows. And I think our giving reflects a different, deeper truth. Again, it reflects where our priorities are. I mentioned, I think 2 weeks ago when I came back, I'm sorry, that being gone last week was weird. I think it's still January, but it feels like the second Sunday in January. And so in some ways it feels like September, and I'm having trouble with all that. But I think I mentioned that I did the last of the 5 weddings I had to do in 2021 on New Year's Eve. And it was a really, it's a really surreal experience for me. I think a lot of factors were coming together. It's the holidays, which are an emotional time, and I had just been with my family, and so I had a great visit, but I missed them, and I missed being with my kids. And, the end of the year, time of reflection, start of a new year, all that's going on. The bride was somebody that I've known for a long time, since she was a little kid. And so, I was personally reflective as I was getting ready and as I was there for the wedding and all that stuff. I was emotional. In the message that I delivered, I chose to talk about time, which is not something I usually talk about, when I'm doing a wedding. The thing is, I feel it, and maybe you feel it as well. I think, in a way, as long as we don't obsess on it, it's good for us to be conscious of the reality that time, for all of us, is slipping away. I mean, it is. And so, at some point, we got to think about, well, what is my legacy going to be? What am I going to leave behind? And there is a hard truth there that we need to come to grips with that sounds terrible, but it's not, if we just wait and listen for the whole truth. The truth is that most of us will not be long remembered. I'm sorry to point that out, but it's true. Most of us are not going to be long remembered. James, you got to love James. I love James and I hate James. Sorry, James. When he writes his letter, he's just so blunt sometimes. And, one of the things he says to us in chapter 4 is, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Oh, James, thank you so much for that word of encouragement. The thing is, that is reality, but that is a reality that should not be depressing. I mean, truth should not depress us. And so this shouldn't either, because as Christians who are a part of the kingdom of God, we are aware, or we should be aware, of a greater reality, that each of us, despite what may happen to our legacy, each of us will still be known personally by God, and each of us will still get to spend eternity with God. Back here on earth, though, man, we are still bound by time. And since most of us are not going to be remembered beyond, frankly, our grandchildren's generation, man, let's make sure we poured ourselves into things that matter, things that make a difference, things that will outlast us. As we ponder our options, let's make sure that God's kingdom gets a meaningful share of the most precious resource that any of us has to offer, our 168. Let's stand together. Let's sing.
You are beautiful beyond description, too marvelous for words, too wonderful for comprehension, like nothing ever seen or heard. Who can grasp your infinite wisdom? Who can fathom the depth of your love? You are beautiful beyond description, majesty enthroned above. And I stand in awe of you. I stand in awe of you. Holy God, to whom all praise is due, I stand in awe of you. Above all powers, above all kings, above all nature and all created things, above all wisdom and all the ways of man. You were here before the world began. Above all kingdoms, above all thrones, above all wonders the world has ever known, above all wealth and treasures of the earth, there's no way to measure what you're worth. Crucified, laid behind the stone, you live to die. rejected and alone like a rose, trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Crucified, laid behind the stone, you lived to die, rejected and alone like a rose, trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all, like a rose trampled on the ground. You took the fall and thought of me above all. Be seated, please.
Thank you, Jeff, for your lesson this morning. As we come before this table and prepare to take the bread and the cup this morning, I guess I was just thinking about how Christ is woven through the very fabric of time. And it's kind of uniquely related to Jeff's sermon this morning. The story has no beginning, it has no end, and that's Christ. And so we sang a song earlier, Standing on the Promises. And so I just want to consider sort of the traditions of the Israelites. As you know, when Christ instituted the Lord's Supper, it was the night before the Passover. And we serve an unchanging God. And so this was part of his plan, all along. There's evidence of Christ in creation. And we look at this dinner through a lens of retrospect. And I think the apostles would have just been blown away had they been able to realize the magnitude of what was happening in the relationship to the manna that their ancestors ate and so forth, and how Christ is the bread of life. And one of my favorite lines in prayer, and one of them comes out of Ephesians, is admonishing God with all glory and all power throughout all generations, forever and ever. And I always like that line because it just speaks to the timelessness of Christ. It also speaks to our own timelessness. I was messaging with a patient of mine, actually a lady that we served in our We Are the Sermon years ago, Marcy, very faithful Christian, and she was battling COVID, and she mentioned something about her age, and she said, well, it's not so much me getting old, it's just this body that I'm in. And it's neat when you pause to really consider the fleeting aspects of time in the physical body, but that we also are an eternal being. And so as you consider, as the Israelites did, they would get together. So somewhere between Moses and Christ instituting this is like 1,500 years of families getting together for a week. The Passover was a feast of pilgrimage, so they would travel to Jerusalem. I'm not sure that we celebrate anything quite like this year, 2022. It's going to be, the dates are April the 15th through the 23rd. I kind of get a feeling like Christmas where, there's just a month of anticipation. You're rearranging your schedule, your family's schedules. In fact, the more I celebrate Christmas, the more uncomfortable I become with it, as I considered especially what our Christian ancestors did, the Israelites. And so, as you know, they were celebrating the Passover, the angel of death. So God instituted through Moses this angel of death as one of the plagues through Pharaoh, who was holding his people in captivity. And so the Israelites were told in order to preserve their firstborn, they would find a lamb, a spotless lamb, a perfect lamb, and they would kill that lamb, and they would use that blood, and they would paint their doorposts. And so ultimately it's a symbolism of a Lamb of God protecting them and preserving them for future purpose. And so I believe it is, I may be wrong on this, but the night before the Passover then is the Feast of the Unleavened Bread. And so there's all sorts of theories and reasons as to why, it's unleavened, absent of yeast. In Scripture, historians call it a food of humility, a bread of poverty. In Matthew, Christ warns against the yeast of the the Pharisees. And so I don't know what all that means, but we come to this point where Christ then, God in every sense, comes down as man. And he is the culmination of the beginning and the end. He is God on earth. So he takes on this flesh, blood running through his veins. And Scripture says that it was necessary for him to become flesh and blood because we are flesh and blood. So to experience life as we experience it, to be the perfect sacrifice, ultimately being made perfect in what he suffered. And so, let's see here. The Israelites were a body of God's people separated. They were in an Egyptian world, but they were not of that Egyptian world. And so, as we think about this, 1,500 years later, we are part of that family. We are part of that covenant. I'm going to skip over to read a little bit in Isaiah, and then I'm going to finish reading in Psalm, but I'm not going to read all of Isaiah 53. You've heard it many times, and it's absolutely beautiful scripture. Let's see here. I think I'm going to read 5 and 12. Just referring to, so Isaiah 53:5. But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him, and by his stripes we are healed. And then at the very end of that chapter, in 12, it says, Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. And so this perfect, spotless lamb is crushed on our account. And he is carrying that burden so we don't have to. And so as we remember him this morning, let's just consider that. We're standing on a promise that is thousands of years old. In fact, it's so old it has no beginning, and it has no end, and neither do you. And so we will be gathered with a great multitude someday in the presence of God with that family, with our future family. And we will break this cup, break this bread, we'll have this cup, all together at some point. And so as we partake of these things, we're putting these emblems, these physical emblems in our body, but we're attesting to the fact that that's what we believe. And we are holding on to those promises that God will restore us, that he is faithful, that he is above all time, he is above all of our failures, above all the assaults and evilness, in this world. So I'll pray over it. We'll take the bread and the cup, and I'd still like to read Psalm 34 in a minute, but let's go ahead and pray over the bread. Our Heavenly Father, we bow in your presence. We are humbled as we consider your love for us, as we consider the endlessness of our lives measured against your Son and what he has done for us, the amazing sacrifice that is evidence of your love. It's evidence of your power over this world. And we're thankful. We look forward to the day where you will call us home, and we know that we will stand righteous in your eyes because of the broken body of your Son and his incredible love for us. We pray over this bread right now. Amen. Psalm 34. I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. I will glory in the Lord. Let the afflicted hear and rejoice. Glorify the Lord with me. Let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears. Those who look to him are radiant. Their faces are never covered with shame. This poor man called, and the Lord heard him. He saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. Taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the one who takes refuge in him. Fear the Lord, you his holy people. For those who fear him lack nothing. The lions may grow weak and hungry, but those who seek the Lord lack no good thing. Come, my children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Whoever of you loves life and desires to see many good days, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are attentive to their cry. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to blot out their name from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers him from them all. He protects all his bones. Not one of them will be broken. Evil will slay the wicked. The foes of the righteous will be condemned. The Lord will rescue his servants. No one who takes refuge in him will be condemned. No one who takes refuge in him will be condemned. A prayer over the cup. Our Heavenly Father, we continue as we bow humbly before you and just thankful for that promise. We're thankful for your Son. We're thankful for his willingness to go to the cross. We're thankful for the purification that occurs through blood. And we're thankful that we will not be condemned before you. We look forward to the life that is in you. We look forward to experiencing you in spirit and in truth. And we attest to that as we partake of your Son's blood. And I pray all things through you. Amen.
First verse only, Robbie. Let's sing together. Encamped along the hills of light, ye Christian soldiers rise, and press the battle ere the night shall veil the glowing skies. Against the foe in vales below, let all our strength be hurled. Faith is the victory we know, that overcomes the world. Faith is the victory, faith is the victory. Oh, glorious victory that overcomes the world.
Good morning. How we doing? It's nice and warm in here, right? Kind of warm? Remember there have been some Sundays it hasn't been this warm in here? So let's be thankful for the little things, except for Jeff. I can feel the cold air still coming up here, which just ain't right, Jeff. A couple things as we close up this morning. Due to the anticipated weather this evening, the youth small group for tonight has been postponed. So keep that in mind. Probably not a surprise, but a formal announcement. Also, this week, Jenny's mom's group has started up again, and it's every other Tuesday night, and so this Tuesday night at 7 o'clock here at the building is that mom's group. It's for all moms, young and old, and the topic I find very interesting is, I said this, you heard that. My wife and I have that conversation weekly, so I am encouraging her to come to the class. But I'm sure that's not how it's going to go.
The videos are free online.
Oh, okay, so I didn't hear that. So anyway, if you are watching online this morning, we miss you. We're looking forward to you coming back. It's been a crazy couple of weeks, and hopefully we'll all settle back into our new routine, and that includes being here. It was just mentioned to me that Sarah Pagenhoff's blood pressure has gone up just last night, so a little bit of concern with that and the baby. It is a scheduled C-section, so just keep Sarah and the family in your prayers as she's getting close to her due date, and blood pressure is kind of all over the place right now. So keep Sarah and her family in your prayers. Anything else? Okay, with that, let's close with a word of prayer, please. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us to be here to worship freely. We thank you for your word. We thank you for a warm place to stay and for food, and we just pray for so many in this area that are struggling on days like today, and we just pray that we keep them in our minds and that we appreciate the way that you have blessed us. We pray that we can be you can be a major, bigger priority in our lives as we deal with the 168 every week. We just pray that we can continually focus on you, just as you continually focus on us. Be with us as we leave this place. In Jesus' name, amen.